So when you try to put what the issue is in numbers and show that, but how do we generate margin by doing this? All of a sudden, people, take a minute, think about it, and then you have the tough discussion you're talking about.
Welcome to Controllers Classified, the podcast where we take a deep dive into the dynamic world of controllers, accountants, and finance leaders, and hear how their ever-evolving roles are redefining accounting and the future of business. And now, here's your host, Eric Zhou.
Hello, and welcome to Controllers Classified. I'm your host, Eric Zhou, the Chief Accounting Officer at Brex, and I'm excited to welcome Daniel Hilli, Head of Business Control at Alstom. He's joining me all the way from Stockholm, Sweden, and with over a decade of experience in helping companies and businesses drive successful operations and increase productivity through spend management and thoughtful analytical data, Daniel helps connect with key decision makers to build profitable businesses for growth. Daniel, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Eric. My pleasure, really.
Maybe to kick off, tell us a little bit about Alstom and what the company does.
Well, I think short and sweet, we do three things. We build trains. I think everyone has seen or heard about one. And then we do signaling systems, which is trains talking to whatever it needs to talk with. And then we do maintenance and services for trains. So that is really the core business. And then to put some flavor on it, roughly 1 billion people are affected every day by our products. So that's more or less 1/7 of the world every day has something to do with our products every day.
Every day, are you saying 1 billion distinct people across the world, like riding trains every day? That's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. So I mean, if we talk about impact business, that is, I think it's we're in that category. We fit in there well.
And tell me about your role specifically as head of business control at the company.
Well, it is for sure understanding the business, preparing a lot of reports for management, trying to understand what we should be doing, where we are, putting some structure, some focus in the numbers, and in the best of worlds, following up contractual topics, aligning with operational managers. Can we do something better? Should we do something differently? So it's really from just getting numbers in a system to really optimizing what we already are doing.
How often does that happen? Like working with the we call it cross-functional work here at Brex. I interact a lot with the marketing team, with the R&D team on the software development side, with our infrastructure team for managing our payment rails. How often do you end up working with the different departments to work through these processes and redesign, redevelop, reassess, etc.?
Well, I think if we take one step back, if we talk about finance, then it's all of us. And then if we define it between accounting and controlling, then accounting are looking, backwards in history, and then we in business control are more looking forward. So that means that, it's every day really that we're looking into what can we do differently and where are we, and is there some pain points that we need to, take a decision on, do something else, optimize, implement, digitalize, what have you. It could be anything of the above.
You must be also reaching out to all these business partners to see how you can help too, and building relationships and looking for ways to build efficiencies as well.
For sure.
You have a big project management background, and then you arrived in this role as head of business control here. Obviously, I know you also have an accounting background as well in general. Was there any critical moment in your career so far that led you to this position at Alstom and your particular role?
Sorry to say, let me speak, let's say clean English. I kind of started my career as first. So I worked myself up to, acting CEO for a company. And then I, started working as a CFO. And then I went down to business controlling. And then I, took a deep dive and went up again to head of business controlling. So I think if there are any key turning points, it is really when you get the opportunity, you take it, and meanwhile you work hard and deliver results, and always try to think about what's the value add I'm really doing. And then I'm not talking about having a fantastic PowerPoint. Really looking at, is this giving anything margin wise? Do we have the correct head count? How do we do this? So in the business controlling perspective, it is hard to do. But if you're more operational, then it's easier, because you're the person talking with the customer, you're the person drawing up the contract with legal, most likely, depending on the size of the company. So of course, if you're a more business person, it's easier. But at the same time, I think in the best of worlds, business control helps with putting perspective and more business on the table, really, or at least optimizing the business we have.
I'm chief accounting officer. I work very closely with the finance team. Sometimes I'm in these meetings when they're going over numbers and profitability with the different departments. Some of those conversations can be pretty tough, like when you're talking to the business about recommendations or things that you want to get changed or think that are better for the business. Can you describe some of those interactions that you have with any particular departments at Alstom?
Our currency in finance is, reliability and, let's say, having trustworthy, clean numbers in a way. Everything kind of starts with that. And then you can have a meeting, and then usually, it's bringing clarity to the meeting. What are we actually discussing? Because when you talk to a business person, this kind of profile always has a lot to do every day. And they are running after the business, trying to solve anything, whatever, operationally. And when you come from finance, you never saw the problem, but you have the perspective. So when you try to put what the issue is in numbers and show that, but how do we generate margin by doing this? All of a sudden, people take a minute, think about it, and then you have the tough discussion you're talking about. But depending on how you lead that discussion from finance, you can come to the conclusion that maybe we're not doing the right things. The trick is that everyone wants to do what they know, and no one wants to step out of their comfort zone. And that goes for if you are to change a system, digitalize, you're getting a new, let's say, opportunity in your work to do something else, your everyday work. Because at some point, people, want to come in and feel that they deliver and they know what they're doing. Coming into work every day, not really knowing what you're supposed to do, it's really tough on people. So I think this kind of change management, that's exactly what happens there.
That really resonates with me. I think for most people at the company, right, they're really focused on their core job. They have a core job that they've come in to do, that they've been doing it, and then going through the change management process inherently is difficult because it's different from what their core job traditionally has been or what they signed up for at the company. And yeah, it's something we definitely tackle with here at Brex as well. That really resonates with me. Let's move into kind of like general operations at Alstom. How many employees do you guys have at the company?
85,000 headcounts right now.
So by comparison, Brex has 1,200. This is like a truly different scale. Tell me where they're located. Like, are they all in Sweden or where are they around?
Roughly 45,000 in Europe, so that's for sure the core business. Then the States, I think we have roughly 10,000, and then they are a bit spread around Africa, APAC, Australia, these kind of regions. The rest of them, APAC, pretty big, but nothing compared to Europe, for sure not. And the States is always the business is that is supposed to happen next year, but it just never happens for different reasons. But for sure that's a big growth market as well.
Given the fact that you guys have physical presence in so many places, how did you think about structuring the finance department globally? And how do they interact with each other if you have them spread out across the different jurisdictions?
We have this classical hierarchical setup. So we have group with functions in finance, and then we have region, cluster, and country level. And then we have the legal entities reporting taxes, but then we also have this matrix or cross-functional, let's say, where you have 3 product lines, which is what we are doing really, building trains, signaling systems, and maintenance. and they then in turn report to their heads that are not reporting to the, let's say, the CEO level, which is the legal entity level. So maybe a bit confusing for someone who hasn't been in this kind of business model, but that's really the setup. So we have the accounting team doing the, let's say, legal entity setup, and then controlling is usually doing both a little bit in cross and then right, well, upwards in the hierarchy.
That's really helpful, actually. But taking a step back, for all of these different functions, country level, region level, you got group level, and I'm assuming that's in Europe. Um, how many finance and accounting professionals is that for the company?
2,500 plus somewhere. The latest number I saw was 2,500 something.
And so let's think about global and bring it all. It's like you got all these teams, different countries, speaking different languages, working with each other. They ultimately all report up to group. What are some of the main issues that you deal with in that kind of schema? Like what are the main concerns that you have or main things that you're trying to work through every day?
Disconnection is one. I mean, there's a very different vision when it comes to stock owners. Uh, let's say what they are expecting from top management, and what their, let's say, how they present the way forward, and what our everyday job is on, let's say, region and cluster level. So it's a very different type of animal depending if you're on the very top or if you're somewhere in the middle. And I think it's understandable and it's doable, and it's not like it's unique for Alstom. But at the same time, it creates a lot of tension and frustration when we don't really talk about the same subjects in meetings sometimes. And the disconnection is also that after you go to vice presidents, they go to their presidents or director level. After that, the, let's say, the story changes, and then we're talking about something completely different. It can be that we have, incorrect data, or we don't have an automatic setup that's working, or it could be that, headcount is incorrect, or, it's more these kind of cleaning processes that we're looking into. While when you come to the vice president, region, or higher level, then it's more the global strategic discussion, which is, you can't really have the both in the same meeting, because then you're lost in details.
At a company of that size, with everyone reporting up to the group, how much of your decision making, and maybe let's focus on like global spend, for instance, or all the spend that the different regions do, how much of that decision making is bottoms up versus tops down, or maybe it's something in the middle because it's so big?
All the decisions are made through bottom up analysis. So we say that this is what the actual spend is, and this is the headcount that is spending it, and this is why we need it. And then we could get a target. But in the end of the day, most of it is connected to projects, which is our business. If we don't deliver the projects, we're not paid, we don't generate sales, we don't generate margin, no cash in, and so on. So it's in a way an easy discussion. In another way, it's a difficult one, because we need to be more lean. We need to, have savings as everyone else. But at the same time, we need to spend, because otherwise we can't deliver. So, it's a balance somewhere there.
You talk about digitalization and like utilization of systems previously. What systems do you use today? Are they the same across every single region and country? You're smiling, and I'm thinking that might not be the case. I was an auditor before, and I've worked on different companies, large companies, and some of them grew by acquisition, and so they couldn't help it. They acquired a company that had a whole separate set of systems. How do you marry the two? I'm curious about your experience at Alstom and what it's like.
We talked a bit about legal entity level. So, a legal entity is a company on a paper. When we bought Bombardier like 3 years ago, we inherited one company that has 19 levels of different legal entities within one legal entity. And they, well, this specific, case, they have different systems talking with each other on all levels. And it's like, 1,000 people working for this specific company. So let's not call it a nightmare, because then it sounds like something is very impossible. But I would say we have exposure in over 70 countries. The 19-layer setup is not unique, but it's not, in every legal entity. But at the same time, we have a lot of systems everywhere. We have, Busware, we have Nomentia, we have SAP, we have, you name it. I think we have all of them, actually. And then the question is, how do you do some kind of homologation there? How do you streamline this? Because in the best of worlds, the dream for top management is that you have the one system that is connected to your iPhone, and with one click you see your free cash flow, order intake, and it's real time, and you don't have to wait for anyone, and accounting has no excuses. And then all of a sudden you have your numbers, and you can run your phone from, I don't know, Bali or Bahamas or whatever. But this kind of, it kind of never happens, right? It just never does.
I mean, that's the vision at Brex and what we're trying to build. I mean, I'll admit that we're not all the way there, but we're certainly on the way, and I think we have compelling products. But yeah, like, I agree with you. People have been dreaming about this for 20 years.
But I think that was maybe furnishing a little bit, complexity and where we are. And I think people might understand what the challenges are just, by talking about a little bit this kind of exposure, and not to talk about, support functions, cybersecurity, call center support in different languages that should be up and running 24/7. And then we talk about 70 plus countries. And now we just pretend that we take one solution, do a copy paste in every legal entity, and we're done.
You guys have obviously disparate systems across different regions, different countries. You have had a major acquisition. What are the kind of processes or manual processes that you've implemented to try to just give yourself some level of visibility into spend at whatever cadence is appropriate for you, whether it's real time, weekly, monthly, etc.?
If we take it from the beginning, when we started the journey, which is, by the way, the biggest acquisition in Europe's history. So the integration between Alstom and Bombardier is the biggest one in Europe. In the States, maybe it's peanuts, but in Europe, for sure, it's the biggest so far. So 40,000 people plus 40,000 people integrating different systems, a bit different cultures, trying to do a setup that works. And then we go into what kind of manual processes have we inserted along the way. I think one good example was when we started, we were supposed to understand where we are as a company, right? And this is monthly. So we get a big report, 70 slides, something, that is supposed to get numbers from a system no one has access to. And long story short, in the end of the day, we needed to, populate all numbers by ourselves, and then build a PowerPoint, and then also understand the numbers. And this was roughly 4 working days. So I think we could take, 100 examples at least, especially in the beginning. And all of these kind of things we're now trying to automate. So we can't sit and build reports somewhere. We just can't. It's impossible. Then we're too far from the wet dream.
How many levels of automation are there? If a system, do you have to build a separate automation for every system, or as part of automating, is that an opportunity for you guys to maybe consolidate some systems or deprecate some systems? Or, there's this question I think of also when you have so many different locations, how much of the processes you want to centralize versus decentralize. Is there that kind of discussion as well? Because you're talking about this huge PowerPoint, getting the data from all these different places. At some, like, obviously the data comes from decentralized processes. Is there a decision there to centralize the process and bring it in-house into the group for whatever reason as a result of automation?
Yes, I think there are some initiatives there. When it comes to these global perspective topics, anything that has a global touch to it, it is centralized, and it is handled by the central team. and they have this kind of their set of experts who just you get an email that now this is happening and there's nothing you can do about it, and then you get a number, but that's it also. So I think in a way it is how it should work. And we actually have also done some tests just doing a top down budget and trying to see how well it fits. um, and actually it's more accurate than a bottom up budget. The problem is that then when you try to give the ownership to someone who didn't do the budget, then everyone is kicking and screaming and saying that we don't want to do it. So there's a sweet spot what you can centralize, and then if you want ownership you need to push it down to the countries, but then you also need to give it to them. Please deliver, this is your budget, this is what you believe in, but then you also need to live up to it.
Speaking of, I think, decentralization versus centralization of a process, that concept and the decision behind it can even affect, like at Brex, most of our operations are in country in the US. And I think about that also at the kind of employee versus finance level. And so we have a process related to procurement, right? And we've actually recently redesigned the process. And for this particular process, we used to have all of the individual requests come in through email into the AP department.
Wow.
And so the AP department would centrally would have to take all those requests, turn them into tickets. We serve the tickets, and we make sure the purchase request gets populated in our procurement system, that it flows through the workflow and gets all the approvals, and we kind of manage the process centrally, right? And that gives a lot of time back to a lot of employees. It's an administrative function. Employees that are in marketing, that are in R&D, they have a core job to market the company or to develop a certain software. It's not really to do administrative work like this. And so we centralized it, and that was the decision we made. Now the company's really big, and now the company has a lot of different departments and a lot of different people in all these departments making purchase requests. And while when we were smaller, it was easier to centralize, I think as we become larger, the decision comes back like, maybe we need to put a little bit more power back into the hands of employees. One, operationally, it's more efficient. And two, sometimes we end up being the blocker because we're centralized and we're the bottleneck. And so, we've redesigned the process. Employees are now back to making the purchase. We actually did a little bit in the middle, but they're putting in the purchase requests now. They manage the intake. They can see how things are going in the system. And we have stuff on the back end that's running sometimes through automation, sometimes like through manual processes. Because like if it's a new legal contract, the lawyers do have to review the contract, et cetera. But yeah, like we've kind of gone through that evolution ourselves between centralization to decentralization, times a flat circle. Maybe one day we think it's more efficient decentralization again. But for you guys, tell me a little bit about how you guys manage those approvals and the kind of spend culture at Alstom. Like when you have different regions or employees that want to spend X, Y, and Z, how much of it is in their power versus you guys centrally managing the process?
Most of the, let's say, the approval process is in our hands. The only time something happens is if we have a block on spend. Then, for instance, all travel needs to go through the CEO, which is, well, it's totally crazy. But it kind of sends a signal that it's for real this time. The thing is, it happens more or less every year, so it's for real often. But I would say we have a lot of power when it comes to the approval processes. But then to go back to your question, we don't handle it actually because one of the things I saw when I came to the company was that we have a lot of systems, we have a lot of different setups, but in the end of the day, we don't really have a clear ownership. You were talking about one email that you send to this specific account, and then it's handled. And this is a little bit the thing I'm doing now all over the company. I try to understand what is it we want and what is it we're doing and what does it look like today. And all of these meetings, I have 15 people doing a little bit here, a little bit there. And I always, put the one person in charge and say that you're the one, Eric. You handle this. You have your team.
You're going through, and maybe you guys use the same words. It sounds like a bit of finance transformation or like systems transformation at
For
Alstom.
sure. I
Yeah.
mean, just to put a number on it, the synergy effects communicated to the market when we started this journey, 600 million euros.
There's real value from digitalization, rethinking your processes, making it you just using the power of software and automation and maybe AI one day, who knows, to make your systems more efficient and productive.
For sure.
You mentioned this ERP implementation or consolidation that's happening right now. That must be a huge project because you guys have so many employees, so many different places that you operate in. What are in my, like, from your perspective, what are the top 2 or 3 things that you make sure things are going well on the implementation across these different regions?
I think have a clear perspective and really have a clear vision on where you need headcount and support, and always try to, be a bit aggressive in the beginning, because time flies, time management is key. And all of a sudden, you talk about implementing during 1.5 year. All of a sudden, the first year just went by and not much really happened. And then in the final 3 months, all of a sudden, everything needs to happen at once. So try to, get a bit nervous, get a bit stressed in the beginning, and try to, solve as much as possible and keep the pace up, because the time flies by, and all of a sudden you're sitting there and you have everything you need to do today, because tomorrow we are pulling the plug.
What we call it here is like creating a sense of urgency. When you have a long
Exactly.
project, people like to think, oh, I have 6 months to do this. I'm going to work at it slowly. I'm going to take it step by step. But actually, when I planned out the 6 months, I was thinking it was going to be this much work, and it all kind of, like, you got to average it out, right? You don't want to do too little and then do too much later on. It also creates a higher risk for errors, right, for oversights and things like that. And I agree, it's really like for us, right, and we're in the software selling business. We really push our clients when they have a more complex integration, to leverage a consultant, leverage an implementation solution consultant that'll keep the team on track and create that sense of urgency for everyone, certainly in the beginning stages of a project.
For sure.
We talked about a lot of different system implementations, a lot of the processes that you guys have at Alstom. What's the funniest accounting debacle that you've kind of witnessed or been a part of?
Well, I can give you two maybe, and it's just these kind of strange things that kind of just happens. And so we had this kind of cowboy CFO, and we came into work like on a Monday, and on Friday he said that, yeah, by the way, we're implementing SAP, and he pulled the plug, and then we just pushed in all data in SAP, and then here's your user account and go ahead and be successful. So we did this kind of cold turkey, and everyone was just, I don't know. So we closed our books on forecast for 6 months. We had no clue where we were. The thing was, we were pretty good at forecasting. So, it was very strange, but at the same time, it was an experience. So, but that was some strange times. And I can tell you another one in the same setup. Then the thought process was that we have these two consultants, right, from SAP sitting there in a room. So they were, hogging this big conference room for themselves. And it was like two people sitting there for 1 year. And the thought process was that, yeah, but they will educate you on how to do your work, right? So, I had my topics and I needed guidance on which button to click on and what to do. And I went in there, and they looked at me like I was from Earth and they were from Jupiter or something. And I had a very simple question. I want to send an invoice. and accounting team needs to look at balance sheet. How do we do that? And they were, kind of mocking me for 5 minutes. And then they gave me a link to a folder with like 1,000 PDFs. And each PDF had like 500 pages in them. And one of those PDFs, told you how to send an invoice. But I mean, it wasn't labeled, how to send an invoice. It was, this typical SAP technical code, ZWE dash something, and you were just supposed to understand this. So, I don't know, it's maybe not so much fun for anyone who doesn't understand this SAP challenge, but for everyone who has been working with it, I think it's, yeah.
But the analogy would be like, and I have kids, and my daughter is going into 5th grade. And I think in 5th grade, let's say you learn something about math. It's like, when my daughter goes into class and she's trying to learn this math equation, the teacher then just shares 5 pages of how the math equation works and says, read this and understand it. It's like the same thing. I want to share one story just because of what you just shared here. And it was from another podcast guest that we had on the show. His name's Ron Cook, and he's the controller at a company called Lightcast in the US. And he's gone through a bunch of implementations too. And I don't know how much it would work at Alstom or any of these companies that you've worked at before. But whenever he does the implementation, he always makes a decision for every department that it impacts. And he says to himself, okay, for this department, are we going to get external people to come in and be the consultants? Or are we going to ask some members of this team to be part of the implementation to learn it and to like kind of drive the processes to ensure? And instead, we use the consultants to do the current process.
Right.
And I actually haven't thought of it like that before. Like, to me, it was novel. Maybe like it's been out there in the world for implementations. But I thought that was really good, because oftentimes what you're looking for is the best marriage of like what you have for your existing process, how you want to evolve it, right? From the people that actually do it today and know it the best with this new system. Well, Daniel, it was great to have you on the podcast. Thank you very much for joining us all the way from Stockholm, Sweden. I know the time it is right now. It's in the early evening. So really appreciate you joining. And for all our guests watching the show, thank you, and look forward to seeing you next time.
Many thanks, Eric, for having me. It was very much appreciated.
Thanks for tuning in to Controllers Classified, presented by Brex. Brex is an AI-powered spend platform with global corporate cards, expense management, reimbursements, and travel. Visit Brex.com and follow Brex on social to see how they can take your accounting game and your company to new heights.